Nobody ever warned Captain Daniel Cross about the perils of first impressions, especially not when facing an alien species so vastly superior that they could wipe out humanity with a single blink. But, of course, no one had prepared them for this particular moment. It all started on what had been a perfectly ordinary morning, the kind where coffee tastes like recycled coolant and everything feels just a little too routine, until the holographic transmission crackled into life on the bridge of the UES Defiance. The image that appeared was unlike anything they'd seen before. An enormous figure, towering at 12 feet tall, covered in shimmering blue scales that looked like polished glass. Muscular, sleek, and intimidating, she was General Vexthera, the supreme commander of the Keith Moran Empire. Her voice, aristocratic and dripping with contempt, boomed through the chamber. "You are pathetic," she announced, her tone cold and dismissive. "Your civilization has stumbled beyond your solar system. We find this presumptuous." Cross leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow at the spectacle. His usual detached amusement flickered to life. "Well, that's one way to make a first impression," he muttered under his breath. Around him, the crew exchanged nervous glances, some wide-eyed, others trying not to gulp audibly. Vexthera's hologram flickered again, her massive form leaning forward as if she could somehow peer through the transmission directly into every human settlement on Earth. Her voice carried aristocratic disdain as she continued. "Your species has somehow managed to stumble past the boundaries of your star system. We, the Keith Moran Empire, have ruled this sector for over 10,000 of your years. We've crushed 17 civilizations, absorbed their technologies, and incorporated their biological distinctiveness into our own. Your pathetic little species will kneel before the might of the Empire or face extermination. Those are your only options." Cross, watching the display with a mixture of boredom and skepticism, leaned into his XO, Commander Elena Vasquez. "She seems nice," he quipped, voice dripping with sarcasm. Vasquez snorted and shot him a quick glare. "Real charmer," she said, "especially when she gives us two choices, neither of which is appealing." The hologram flickered again, and for a moment, Vexthera's massive form appeared to lean forward, as if she could somehow peer into every human settlement at once. "You have 72 hours to consider our generous offer," she declared. "After that, resistance will be demonstrated to be not just futile, but laughably inadequate." Then, abruptly, the transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in an eerie silence, like the calm before a hurricane. Cross finally broke the silence. "Anyone else think she's compensating for something?" he asked aloud, grinning. His comment earned a few nervous chuckles. But mostly, the crew just stared at the blank screen, contemplating the unthinkable. Humanity was staring down the barrel of annihilation, and their only hope was bureaucracy? The grim reality sank in. The Keith Moran fleet, they learned, was in the thousands, each ship monstrous in size, heavily armed, and technologically superior by orders of magnitude. Their weapons made Earth's nuclear arsenals look like fireworks. Human military power? A pathetic 27 ships, hardly enough to scare a house cat. What about their shields? Admiral Rebecca Hartley asked, her tone sharp and experienced. Any weaknesses? Torres, the xenotechnology expert, grimaced. Their shields are adaptive, he explained. They analyze incoming attacks and adjust their frequency in real time. Our weapons? Useless after the first few shots. Armor self-repairs instantly. You'd have to destroy the entire ship all at once to make any dent. Cross watched as the room turned pale. The odds were clear. Humanity was outmatched completely. Yet, amidst the despair, a question lingered in everyone's mind. What was their weakness? Every species has one, Vasquez said, voice tight. Even the Keith Moran. Do they have a blind spot? Torres pulled up a hologram of their physiology. They're large, long-lived, and very hierarchical. They don't handle surprises well. They've crushed civilizations with a simple, brutal playbook, overwhelming firepower, demands for surrender, and systematic destruction. That's it. Cross scratches chin, eyes narrowing. And what happens to those who surrender? Do they get a second chance? Torres hesitated. They're absorbed, given some rights, allowed to keep their culture until they fight again. Then extinction. The room chilled. The stakes had never been clearer. Humanity, it seemed, faced a choice. Fight a hopeless war or surrender and hope for mercy. Cross stared out at the distant gleam of the approaching fleet, feeling the weight of the impossible. The answer, he realized, was simple. They would stall, just long enough to buy time. Because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was delaying, no matter how absurd it appeared. And so, with grim determination, they prepared to turn their doom into a bureaucratic nightmare, knowing full well that the true battle had only just begun. Humanity's response to the looming threat was anything but heroic, more like bureaucratic chaos wrapped in a well-meaning, utterly confusing mess. The emergency council was convened in frantic haste, meetings stretching into hours that felt like days. The room was a whirlwind of anxious faces, frantic typing, and hurried decisions. When Admiral Rebecca Hartley finally stood, her expression was grim but determined. "We're going to surrender," she announced, voice steady despite the chaos. Sort of. The room erupted into surprised murmurs. Vasquez blinked, leaning forward. "What do you mean, sort of?" Hartley shrugged, a half-smile tugging at her lips. "We're going to do it the right way, by their rules. We're going to follow every protocol, every ritual, every archaic requirement in their surrender procedures. We'll make them wait, make them jump through hoops. We'll be so frustratingly meticulous, they'll forget what they were even angry about." Torres, the engineer, looked skeptical. "You think that'll work?" Hartley nodded confidently. Turns out, Keith Morans are obsessed with procedure. Their society's built on hierarchy, rituals, and rules. If we follow their rules to the letter, exactly, then maybe, just maybe, we'll buy some time. We give them paperwork, forms, signatures, lots of signatures, and they'll get so bogged down trying to process it all that they might lose patience. The room fell silent as everyone digested this plan. It was ridiculous, utterly impractical, and yet it was their best shot. Torres quickly pulled up a hologram of the Keith Moran surrender ritual, a sprawling, 847-page document filled with diagrams, legalese, and step-by-step instructions for every aspect of surrender. Cross, watching the scene unfold, leaned back with a grin. "You're telling me you want to surrender to these guys by filling out a mountain of paperwork?" "Exactly," Hartley said, smiling wryly. "Think of it as our way of giving them a headache they'll never forget." Within hours, the world's bureaucrats and military officials scrambled to inventory everything. Every weapon, every piece of civilian tech, every cultural relic, and meticulously compile every detail into the giant files. Human engineers, scientists, diplomats, and even civilians worked tirelessly, creating reports, photographs, and detailed descriptions. Their inventory of civilian technology alone grew into millions of pages, each document carefully categorized and filed. Meanwhile, the Keith Moran observers arrived. Massive ships, each the size of small city, floating ominously in orbit. Their lead, Subcommander Zexon, was tall, stern, and thoroughly bewildered by the human chaos. He watched the frantic activity with a mixture of curiosity and frustration. "You are very thorough," Zexon observed, voice clipped with surprise. Cross grinned. "We're very good at paperwork. It's practically an art form." Zexon's assistants scribbled notes, clearly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of human documentation. "This process is unprecedented," Zexon admitted, shaking his head. "Yeah," Cross said, smirking. "We're experts at dragging things out." Over the following weeks, humanity's documentation efforts intensified. Civilian tech inventories, cultural archives, military assets. all meticulously logged with absurd levels of detail. Every ship's blueprint, every cultural artifact, every personal possession was cataloged. The Keith Morans, who valued protocol more than anything, found themselves caught in a bureaucratic labyrinth they couldn't escape. And all the while, the Keith Moran fleet loomed closer, waiting for their formal surrender, waiting for humans to hand over their paperwork, one signature at a time. Humanity's gamble was simple: delay. Because as Cross mused, if we can't beat them with firepower, maybe we can beat them with bureaucracy. It was a ridiculous plan, but one that just might buy enough time for humanity's last, desperate hope to outlast the invaders by drowning them in paper. Absolutely. Here's the expanded, engaging version of Chapter 3, approximately 500 words, with vivid dialogue, banter, and a focus on maintaining the story's flow and emotional tone. As the weeks dragged on, the humans' frantic paperwork marathon became a bizarre spectacle that no one saw coming. The United Earthship Defiance and countless other vessels were now repositories of mountains of documents, each one more absurdly detailed than the last. The crew, once hardened military officers and scientists, now spent their days buried under stacks of forms, inventories, and digital records. The tension was thick enough to cut with a laser blade, but the strange thing was most of them had started to find a strange sort of humor in it. Did you see the latest? Vasquez called out from her station, voice tinged with disbelief. They want a detailed account of every piece of furniture on the ship, even the coffee mugs. Torres chuckled, leaning over his console. I told them we'd need a week just to catalog the mugs. They're really serious about this. Hartley entered the room, holding a file so thick it looked like it could double as a doorstop. She grinned at the chaos. I swear, if they asked for a bio of every crew member's pet next, I might just start a pet registry. Cross leaned back in his chair, watching the chaos unfold with a smirk. You know what's hilarious? They're taking this seriously. Like it's some kind of sacred ritual, the great paperwork ceremony, I call it. Vasquez shot him a glare. This isn't a joke, Cross. We're doing everything we can to buy time. Maybe not the most glamorous strategy, but it's effective. Every delay is another day we've got to figure out a real plan. Meanwhile, the Keith Morans, massive, intimidating ships that looked like floating fortresses, hovered patiently in orbit, their towering silhouettes casting long shadows over Earth. Their commanders grew increasingly impatient, but the humans' relentless paperwork seemed to frustrate them more than any weapon fire could. Zexon, the lead Moran's observer, finally emerged from the shadows of his ship, a towering figure with a stern face. He was used to protocol and order, but even he couldn't hide his bewilderment at the human chaos. You humans are unusual, Zexon observed, raising an eyebrow. Your processes, they're unlike anything I've encountered. Cross grinned. That's because we're specialists at wasting time. You might say it's an art form. Zexon's assistants scribbled furiously, try to keep up with the torrent of human documentation. Your documents are voluminous, he admitted, clearly overwhelmed. This process is unprecedented. Hartley stepped forward, a playful glint in her eye. Oh, you think this is bad? Just wait until we get to the part where we need to fill out the how to apologize for Earth's existence form. The room erupted into reluctant laughter, a rare moment of levity amid the tension. For a brief second, everyone forgot about the impending doom and the seemingly hopeless task ahead. They were just humans trying to outsmart, or at least outlast, the invaders with a mountain of paperwork. Days turned into weeks as the paperwork avalanche continued. Every department was meticulously logging every item, every action, every piece of data with obsessive precision. Civilians, scientists, soldiers, all contributed to the madness. Even the most mundane objects, from a paperclip to a spaceship engine, were given detailed reports. Meanwhile, the Keith Morans watched from orbit, their patience thinning. Zexon, the lead commander, found himself increasingly baffled by the human obsession with bureaucracy. You believe, that this will delay us?" Zexon asked, voice a mixture of curiosity and frustration. Cross nodded confidently. "Exactly. We're wasting your time, one signature at a time. And if we can keep you busy long enough, maybe we can figure out a way to turn this around." Zexon studied the chaos below, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Your strategy is unconventional." Cross grinned again. "Unconventional? Maybe. But hey, desperate times call for desperate measures. And right now, our best weapon might just be a mountain of paperwork that makes you wish you'd never heard of Earth." And so, humanity clung to their absurd, elaborate plan, believing that somehow, in the chaos and frustration, they might just find a sliver of hope. As the endless wave of paperwork continued, a new challenge emerged, one that none of them had anticipated. The Keith Morans, impatient and increasingly frustrated, decided to send a delegation to negotiate their terms. But these weren't ordinary negotiations. The Morans had a peculiar obsession with ritual, tradition, and, oddly enough, cultural exchanges. When the alien delegation arrived aboard their massive flagship, the humans braced themselves for a strange, awkward encounter. The first thing that struck the humans was how formal the Keith Morans were. They moved with a strange, almost dance-like precision, their towering forms bowing deeply before speaking. Cross watched from the control room, arms crossed, a bemused grin on his face. "So, I guess we're doing this," Vasquez whispered, her tone a mixture of nervousness and sarcasm. "They're really serious about all this protocol stuff." Torres rolled his eyes. "Yeah, I'd say so. Looks like a diplomatic dance from some ancient civilization." "Great. Just what we needed. More rituals to memorize." The lead Moran, Zexon, stepped forward, his voice deep and measured. "Humans, we have come to discuss the terms of surrender and mutual understanding. Your documentation process has intrigued us. Tell us, do you often surrender to mountains of paper?" Hartley stepped up, trying to keep her tone light but firm. "Well, Zex, it's not typical, but we're making history in our own unique way." Zexon tilted his head, eyeing the mountain of documents piled nearby. "Your people seem very meticulous. Tell me, what is the purpose of this paperwork?" Cross smirked and leaned toward the microphone. "It's our way of saying, please wait patiently while we figure out how to survive this." There was a pause as Zexon processed that, then a flicker of what might have been amusement or confusion. The aliens studied the humans' strange rituals of filing, signing, and cataloging everything under the sun. Their own culture valued honor and tradition, but they had never seen anything quite like this bureaucratic marathon. Meanwhile, the humans debated their next move. Vasquez nudged Hartley. "You think they're starting to get bored? Or are they just baffled beyond words?" Hartley shrugged. "Either way, it's working. The longer they're stuck trying to decode our paperwork, the more time we buy. Besides, I swear if I see one more form asking for the number of personal belongings in your command module, I might lose it." Back in orbit, Zexon's delegation examined the documentation with growing bewilderment. "Your civilization's obsession with order is remarkable," Zexon said, voice calm but edged with curiosity. "In our culture, such extensive paperwork signifies a desire to delay or deceive." Cross grinned. "Or maybe we just like to overthink things. Either way, you're stuck with us." The alien delegates exchanged glances, clearly puzzled but intrigued by this peculiar species' tactics. They continued their assessments, asking questions about Earth's history, culture, and technology. Each query met with detailed, over-the-top responses from the humans, who had turned their bureaucratic chaos into an art form. As the negotiations dragged on, the humans realized that their strategy was more than just delaying. It was a strange form of cultural diplomacy, a way to stall the invaders' advance while secretly planning their next move. Despite the absurdity, the humans clung desperately to hope, knowing that if they could keep the Keith Morans tangled in endless rituals and paperwork, They might buy enough time for something, anything, to turn the tide. And so, amid the strange diplomacy, banter, and mounting frustration on both sides, humanity's battle of wits and patience continued. Because in this war of attrition, sometimes the strangest weapons, like a mountain of paper, could be the most effective. Weeks had passed since the alien delegation's arrival, and the chaos of paperwork and diplomatic antics had become the new normal aboard the ship. Yet, beneath all the bureaucratic madness, something unexpected started to brew. A flicker of hope, a tiny spark of resilience that refused to be snuffed out. The humans, exhausted but stubborn, had begun to realize that their strange, convoluted tactics might be working. The Keith Morans, for all their intimidating presence, were starting to show signs of frustration, their patience wearing thin. One evening, Vasquez leaned against the control panel, her face lit by the flickering screens, a wry smile playing on her lips. "You know what's hilarious?" she said, voice tinged with a mixture of exhaustion and amusement. "All this paperwork and ritual stuff, and I'm pretty sure they're more confused now than when they arrived." Torres chuckled, adjusting his uniform. "Yeah, I think they're starting to realize that we're not just a bunch of scatterbrained humans. We're playing a game of patience, and we're winning." Hartley, who had been quietly reviewing some documents, looked up with a grin. "I swear, if we keep this up, they'll eventually give up out of pure boredom. Or maybe they'll just start writing their paperwork to keep themselves busy." Cross, lounging a chair with his feet up, added with a smirk, "Either way, I love it. It's like watching a giant alien game of who can get frustrated first. And right now, I'd say we're winning." Meanwhile, aboard the Keith Moran flagship, Zexon and his team observed the humans' behavior with a mixture of bewilderment and curiosity. Their towering forms moved slowly, almost ponderously, as they debated the next step. They had expected resistance, but not this strange, methodical warfare of bureaucracy and patience. Zexon finally spoke, voice deep and measured. "Their actions are unlike any species I've studied. They appear to be deliberately stalling, not out of fear, but perhaps out of some strange confidence." One of his assistants nodded. "It's as if they believe that their endless paperwork will somehow outlast our patience, or perhaps distract us entirely." Zexon's eyes narrowed. "It is perplexing, but I sense they possess a cunning beyond mere chaos. It is a form of strategy, though eccentric." Back on the ship, Vasquez grinned. "You know what I think? They're just stubborn enough to keep doing this until we're too exhausted to continue. And if that's their plan, then bravo, because it's working." Hartley leaned in closer to her console. "We're turning their madness against them. Who knew that a mountain of forms could be a weapon?" Cross stood up, stretching dramatically. "I've always said, sometimes the best way to fight fire is with more paperwork. Who needs lasers when you've got bureaucracy?" The human crew shared a tense but determined laugh. They knew this wasn't just about delaying the inevitable anymore. It was about showing the invaders that humans could fight with their own strange, unpredictable tactics. Every signature, every form, every ritual was a small victory, an act of defiance that kept the hope alive. Meanwhile, Zexon and his team continued their reconnaissance, trying to decode the strange human rituals. Their patience was thinning, but beneath their stern exterior, a grudging admiration was forming. These humans, bizarre as they were, refused to give in. They fought with patience, with stubbornness, and an unyielding belief that somehow this chaos might still turn the tide. As night fell over the ship, the humans huddled together, exchanging stories and bantering about the absurdity of their situation. They knew they had only one choice: keep fighting this strange war of patience and paperwork, because sometimes in the strangest tactics lay the seed of victory. And as the alien monitors continued to observe, the humans silently vowed, no matter how long it took, they wouldn't give up. Not yet. Not while they still had a shred of hope left. Absolutely. Here's the expanded, engaging version of Chapter 6, approximately 500 words, packed with lively dialogue, banter, and vivid scenes that maintain the story's flow and keep the audience captivated. The tension aboard the ship had reached a boiling point. Days turned into weeks, and despite their clever tactics, the humans knew they couldn't keep the charade going forever. The Keith Morans, relentless in their pursuit, finally decided to escalate their efforts. A new envoy arrived, this time more formidable, more imposing, and with an air of impatience that made the human skin crawl. Zexon's team appeared on the bridge, towering and silent, their eyes narrowing as they scrutinized the chaos below. Vasquez leaned over to Hartley, whispering with a mischievous grin, "So, I guess this is the big guns moment. Hope they're ready for a game of who can outstare whom." Hartley smirked. "I'd pay good money to see that. But honestly, I think they're just tired of all this diplomatic nonsense. They want answers, and they want them yesterday." Cross, lounging casually, looked up as the new delegates arrived. Well, he drawled. "Looks like they're finally ready to get serious. Or maybe they're just bored out of their minds. Either way, I say we give them a show." The lead Moran, Zexon himself, stepped forward with deliberate gravity. His voice was deep and commanding. "Humans, we have come to resolve this matter swiftly. Your prolonged resistance is perplexing. Explain yourselves." Vasquez, ever quick with wit, shot back. "Explain ourselves? Well, Zexon, it's a long story. Something about how humans love to complicate even the simplest things. Maybe it's a cultural thing, or just our way of saying, hey, we're complicated creatures, deal with it." Zexon tilted his massive head, studying her with a mixture of curiosity and exasperation. "Your words are evasive, yet I sense there is more beneath your resistance. Tell me, what is the purpose of this bureaucratic chaos?" Hartley, stepping forward, folded her arms and grinned. "Bureaucracy? Oh no, you've got it all wrong. It's our way of saying, please hold while we try to figure out how to survive this mess." The room fell into an awkward silence, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. The humans exchanged glances, knowing that their strange antics had, at least temporarily, unsettled the Moran delegation. They watched as the aliens examined the mountain of forms, the endless stacks of documents, and the bizarre rituals of signatures and approvals. To Zexon, it was like watching a ritual from some distant, primitive world, except this ritual was painfully, hilariously complex. Meanwhile, aboard the flagship, the humans kept up their act of defiance. Vasquez leaned toward Hartley with a grin. "You know, if we keep this up, they might just give up out of pure frustration. Or maybe they'll start signing their forms just to keep busy." Hartley chuckled. "Honestly, I'd pay to see that. Dear Zexon, please fill out this form before we proceed," she said mockingly. Cross, standing up, smirked. "Sometimes, the best way to fight fire is with more paperwork. Who needs lasers when you've got bureaucracy?" Despite the banter, everyone knew the stakes. This wasn't just about stalling or playing games anymore. It was a battle of wills. The humans, with their absurd rituals, had managed to keep the invaders at bay longer than anyone expected. Every form they signed, every ritual they performed, was a small act of rebellion, a reminder that humanity wouldn't go down without a fight, even if that fight was wrapped in the strangest tactics. Zexon's team watched in growing disbelief as the humans continued their bizarre dance of diplomacy. They hesitated, exchanging silent signals, unsure whether this was a clever strategy or sheer madness. But beneath their stern exterior, a grudging admiration was forming. These humans, chaotic as they seemed, refused to surrender, clinging to hope and ingenuity. They had turned the alien invasion into a strange game of patience and persistence, and somehow, that made all the difference. As the day wound down, the humans regrouped, exchanging quiet words of encouragement. They knew that this war of attrition wasn't over yet, but for today, they had managed to hold their ground. They understood that sometimes victory wasn't about winning outright. It was about enduring, about keeping the hope alive just a little longer, no matter how absurd the methods. Because in this strange, endless battle, sometimes the wildest tactics, like an endless mountain of forms, could be the key to survival. And as Zexon's delegation prepared to leave, the humans silently vowed they wouldn't give up. Not yet. Not while hope flickered in the chaos. The tension in the ship's control room was palpable as the final days of this strange standoff approached. The humans, battered but unbroken, could feel the weight of exhaustion pressing down, yet a flicker of hope still burned brightly in their eyes. The alien delegation, led by Zexon himself, lingered on the bridge, their massive forms looming over the humans like silent sentinels of an unresolved conflict. Both sides seemed to sense that the game was nearing its end, either in victory or surrender. Vasquez leaned against the console, smirking as she watched the alien delegation scrutinize the mountain of forms of documents stacked high before them. She turned to Hartley and whispered, "Well, I'd say they're running out of patience, or maybe just out of ways to be confused. Either way, I think we've bought ourselves enough time." Hartley nodded, eyes twinkling with a mixture of relief and mischief. "And I bet they're starting to realize that we're not just a bunch of chaotic humans. We're masters of patience or stubbornness, whichever you prefer." Cross, ever the Joker, chuckled and added, "If this keeps up, I'm betting they'll be signing their forms just to get away from us. Or maybe they'll start asking us for tips on how to be as stubborn as we are." Meanwhile, on the alien flagship, Zexon's expression was inscrutable. He stood tall and commanding, yet his eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity. He addressed his team in a measured tone. "Their resistance is unlike any we have encountered. They use their chaos, their disorder, as a shield. But I wonder, are they truly defiant or simply exhausted?" One of his aides nodded slowly. "Perhaps both. Or maybe they're playing a long game we don't yet understand. Their rituals seem nonsensical, yet there's a strange sense of strategy behind it." Zexon's deep voice rumbled with thought. "It is perplexing, but I see now that this chaos is part of their strategy. They refuse to surrender, even when faced with our might. There's resilience in their madness. We must decide, do we push harder or retreat and reconsider?" Back on the ship, Vasquez turned to Hartley with a sly grin. "You know what I think? They're just trying to wear us down, so we give up. But I gotta say, props to us. We've turned their chaos into a weapon, and they're not even realizing it." Hartley laughed softly. "I never thought I'd say this, but maybe the strangest tactics are the most effective. Who knew that a mountain of paperwork would be the key to holding off an alien invasion?" Cross stretched dramatically and grinned. "If they're smart, they'll realize that sometimes the best way to win is to let chaos be your ally. And hey, if that doesn't work, we've still got plenty more forms to fill out." Despite the banter, everyone knew that the moment of finality was near. This battle of wills had pushed both sides to their limits, and now it hung in the balance. The humans, with their bizarre rituals and stubborn refusal to give in, had proven that resilience could take many forms, even the strangest ones. Their unyielding spirit was a testament to the human capacity for creativity under pressure, even if that creativity manifested as endless signatures and ritualistic chaos. Zexon's delegation prepared to leave, exchanging silent, meaningful glances. The humans watched silently, knowing that this strange war of patience might have reached its conclusion. As the alien ships began to retreat, a tense silence fell over the bridge. The humans released a collective breath they hadn't realized they'd been holding. They had survived, they had held their ground, and most importantly, they had refused to surrender their hope. As the alien ships disappeared into the distance, the crew of the ship stood together, exhausted but victorious in their unique way. They had played the game of chaos and patience, and in doing so, had sent a clear message. No matter how strange or overwhelming the enemy might be, the resilience of the human spirit would always endure. They knew this victory wasn't just about delaying defeat. It was about proving that sometimes the most unconventional tactics can win the day. And as they looked toward the horizon, they understood that the story was far from over, because the true victory was in their unbreakable will to survive.